Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva. Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha arteshu abhignaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna swena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of threefold gunas, appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusion maya of the material world. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amrita drava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking the sweet nectar day after day. So now we are entering the 24th chapter of the third Skandha of Bhagavatam, which is about the sacred descent avatar of Kapila. So we saw that Sage Kardama and his wife Devahuti were engaged in living a married life right in the ashram by the yogic powers of the Sage Kardama, and then she gave birth to 9 daughters who are 9 great daughters who will be married to sages, each one of them. We will see that. After that, she had a desire for having a male child and also to be completely devoted to the Supreme Being. So now Maitreya resumes the narration to Vidura by saying, when Devahuti spoke in this manner, Sage Kardama was pleased. So Sage Kardama, as we saw, first said he will leave now that 9 daughters were born. But now that Devahuti expressed a desire to have a male child, which he already knew because he was told this by the Supreme Being Sri Hari when he appeared to Sage Kardama after his tapas. But he tested Devahuti, as it were, to see whether she also feels the same way, and she exactly said the same thing, that she wants to have a male child. And so Sage Kardama was pleased and he said, "Worry not, O Devahuti. In fact, the immortal Supreme Lord will enter your womb." Now he reveals this to her and he says, "You have already undertaken many sacred vows and you have purified yourself. Now, in order to receive the Supreme Being in your womb, you have to undergo great tapas. So, engage in tapas and engage in great penance and all religious observances again, so that you are ready to receive the greatest energy, the Supreme Being Himself, descending as Avatar." He says, "Tapo dravina danaischa shraddhayacha Ishwaram bhaja." He says, adore the Supreme Lord Ishvara with tapo dravina danaischa shraddhaya, with great sincerity, penance, and all kinds of religious observances properly, and being gratified, the Supreme Being, the Lord Sri Hari, will be born as a son to you, and thereby he will spread both our fame too, because as we see, we are still narrating the story of Devahuti and Sage Kardama, and especially Devahuti because she will be personally instructed by the Lord on Sankhya Yoga, and thereby her fame is eternally preserved because of being the mother, just as how Devaki and Vasudeva, giving birth to the Lord Sri Krishna, are eternally remembered, so is Devahuti and Sage Kardama. And he says he will spread this teaching that will cut the knot of ignorance, which is the false identification with body and mind as me and mine. He will give the highest knowledge and cut the knot of ignorance in people's hearts, and thereby spread this great highest teaching of Sankhya Yoga. So, listening to this, Devahuti is very pleased, and with great faith and regard for her husband, Sage Kardama, as she always does, she took herself to total worship of the Supreme Being. Samyak Shraddhaya Purusham Kutastam Bhajat Gurum. It says, so the great Supreme Person, she took to the worship of the Supreme Being Sri Hari with great Shraddha, with great sincerity. And in a course of time, it took a long time, in fact, and after a long time, the Supreme Lord Madhusudana, it's the beautiful word name of Krishna used here of Vasudeva. It says, Tasyam Bahutite Kale Bhagavan Madhusudanaha, the Supreme Being, Sri Madhusudana, after considerable time, manifested himself through Kardama into the womb of Devahuti. So the word Madhusudana, in fact, is a beautiful name of Krishna like many. Madhu is a demon who was killed by Krishna outwardly. Madhu also means honey, which is the outer sweetness, and therefore the meaning of Madhusudana also, the esoteric meaning, is that he removes attachment to any outer sensory sweetness by giving the true taste of inner being. Normally, we are attached to the sensory pleasures which appear like honey, and this attachment makes us bound to the body and the senses. So, by removing this attachment, Krishna reveals the inner truth as the eternally sweet, ever loving being. That's the inner meaning of Madhusudana. So he appears in her womb, and it is said that at the time of his descent, when he is born, the whole earth is celebrating. There is heavenly flowers, and there is all kinds of music that is being heard in the celestial regions, and all the lakes and rivers are looking so clear. So all auspicious signs are there as the Lord is born. And Brahma, along with all the sages, as we may remember, Brahma gave birth to 9 sages, along with Narada and the 4 boys, Sanaka and Sanatana, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara. With all of them, Brahma came at that hour when Sri Kapila was born, the Lord as Kapila, to offer his obeisances. So Brahma comes there with all these sages to the banks of Saraswati, and Brahma, being aware that it is the Supreme Being who is born as a baby and who knows everything, so he knows that he has descended in order to impart the knowledge of Sankhya Yoga, and therefore he speaks to the sage and his wife. And first he addresses the sage by saying he is very pleased with Sage Kardama, because Sage Kardama, as we saw, took the instruction of his father Brahma very seriously, and he took to penance to beget children. So Brahma told Kardama to beget children, and for that very purpose he sat in tapas, had the vision of the Lord, and as told by him, he married Devahuti, and he had 9 daughters, and now he has had the Lord himself as his son. So Brahma is very pleased, and he says, you have set the example for how to listen to one's own father and thereby execute the command of the father with great reverence and setting the right example. Then he says, you have these 9 wonderful daughters. They are great beings, and each one of them will be helpful in furthering the human race with noble people. Therefore, give each of them to these 9 rishis. So he has brought 9 rishis with him, as we saw. So Brahma says, give each of them to these 9 rishis. Then he turns to Devahuti and he says, I know the most ancient being, the supreme being, has descended by his own Maya as your son. He says, Vedahamadyam Purusham Avatirnam Swamayaya Bhutanam Shevadhim Deham Vibranam Kapilam Mune. He says, I know that the Supreme Lord has come by his own Maya and he is going to be known as Kapila Muni, Kapila Rishi, Kapila Deva. There are many names because Kapila is a great seer, is a great Rishi, and he is the Lord himself. So he says he has appeared. And what is he going to do? He says, Jnana Vijnana Yogena Karmana Muddharan Jataha Hiranyakesha Padmaksha Padma Mudra Padambujah. He says, Jnana Vijnana Yogena, by the yoga of wisdom and clarity, Jnana Vijnana Yoga, Karmana Muddaran Jataha, he will remove the seed of desire for action. So he will essentially give the knowledge, Sankhya Yoga, which is the highest knowledge combined with devotion. So in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter also, Krishna's whole teaching is called Sankhya Yoga, and Krishna uses Sankhya Yoga as synonymous with Jnana Yoga. And that Sankhya Yoga is always mixed with devotion, bhakti, because this true recognition of oneself is always with devotion to the Supreme Being as the only truth and the utter falsity of the separative ego as I and mine. So it is both the negation of the false I and the utter surrender and total devotion to the true being. So this Sankhya Yoga is what he has come to teach, and he describes his appearance too. Interestingly, he says Hiranyakeshaha, which means Kapila is with golden hair. He's got blonde hair. And Padmakshaha, he's got lotus eyes and lotus feet. So with these beautiful physical characteristics, he is going to spread the glory of Sankhya Yoga, is what Brahma says. And he says he will cut the knot of ignorance and he will roam about the earth and he will be the greatest of all Siddhas. He says, I am Siddha Ganadhishaha Sankhyacharyahi Susammataha Loke Kapila Ityakhyam Gantate Kirtivardhanaha. He says, he'll be the greatest of Siddhas, he'll be the Sankhya-charya, that is the teacher of Sankhya, and Loke Kapila Ityakhyam, he'll be famous as Kapila, which is still a very famous name. Many people are named as Kapil in Bharat. It's a very common name, in fact, in many parts of India. So he is known as, he'll be famous as Kapila, he says. So he'll be the greatest of Siddhas, teacher of Sankhya, and famous as Kapil. And this is why in Bhagavad Gita, which comes much later, as we know, when Krishna appears and teaches Arjuna, he says in the chapter on what's called Vibhuti, on his glories, when he says, I am the, for example, he says, I am among all orchards, I am Ram, and among all trees, I am the banyan tree, and so on. When he says among all Siddhas, Krishna says, I am Kapila. He says, Siddhanam Kapilo Munihi. This is 10th chapter, 26th verse. Krishna says, among all Siddhas, I am Kapila, because Kapila is the greatest Siddha, which is his own avatar. And he'll be glorified by all, Kirti Vardhanaha. So, having said this, Brahma returned with Narada and Sanaka and his brother. So he came with the 9 rishis along with Narada and Sanaka and the 4 sagely boys. but he left only taking Narada and Sanaka and the four sagely boys because they are not interested in getting married. They are eternally celibate. So they went back with Brahma, whereas the 9 rishis who are to marry the 9 daughters, he left them back there. And in turn, it is said that as instructed by his father Brahma, the 9 rishis were given the 9 daughters, and each of them are great rishis, and the wives are also great beings. So it's listed here. Kala is given to Marichi, Anasuya to Atri. So these daughters, many of them are very well known to the daughters of Kardama and Devahuti. Anasuya, the name literally means one who is free of envy. She is a great daughter, a great wife of Atri. She is held as a paragon of virtue and devotion to her husband Atri. And she instructs Sita herself later when Ram appears with Sita and they come to the forest. It is Anasuya who instructs Sita and gives her some special jewels and so on. And also, Atri and Anasuya give birth to Dattatreya, who gave Avadhuta Gita and so on. So, Anasuya is a great being married to Atri. Shraddha is married to Angira. Havirbhu to Pulastya. Gati to Pulaha. Kriya to Kratu. Khyati to Bhrigu. And finally, Arundhati to Vasishta. Arundhati also many may have heard, the consort of Vasishta, who is also a great rishi. So all these 9 rishis were given the 9 daughters, and Atharva was given Shanti, that's the ninth. So with this done, with all the 9 daughters married, the sages, the 9 rishis, along with their now newly married wives, left Kardama and Devahuti very happily. Now, Kardama and Devahuti are with the Supreme Being, Kapila, who has just born. And Sage Kardama now goes to the Lord and very privately he addresses the Supreme Lord even when Devahuti is not there, because Kardama knows exactly being told by the Supreme Being himself. So he offers very beautifully a great prayer to his own son, because he knows that his son is the Supreme Lord. We see the same come much later when Krishna appears as the son of Vasudeva. Vasudeva offers a prayer to his own son. Similarly, here, Sage Kardama offers a beautiful prayer to his own son Kapila by saying, while people are struggling in this world, going through the cycle of birth and death, and not able to be free of it only because of their own evil deeds, because of their own false identification with ego and so on, you have appeared out of your own costless grace in my house in order to both give us and give this whole world true knowledge of self. You are always intent on enhancing the glory of your devotees and also to spread knowledge. This is why you have appeared. He says, Chikirshur Bhagavan Jnanam Bhaktanam Manavardhanah. He says, you always enhance the glory of your devotees. Bhaktanam Manavardhanah. And the other purpose is Chikirshur Jnanam Bhagavan. So as Bhagavan, you come to spread wisdom. So this is the case with, of course, Krishna, who much later appears as son of Vasudeva, teaches Bhagavad Gita, and at every instant glorifies his own devotees. So we see this with Kapila too. So Kardama glorifies him by saying, you are appearing to enhance the glory of me and Devahuti and give this great wisdom to the whole world. And your transcendent form is beyond all matter, and yet you enter matter taking these forms simply for these purposes. So, again, this verse in Gita, which has been repeated many times, but it's worth remembering, where Krishna says, I appear to simply give the glorious birth and pastimes simply by remembering which people can realize me. He says, Janma karma chame divyam yomam veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti so Arjuna. So, simply by appearing and exhibiting all these various pastimes, one purpose of which it is to spread knowledge, wisdom, like Sankhya Yoga in the case of Kapila, or the glorious Bhagavad Gita itself, as Krishna did. But the other purpose is to simply give the story of the name and the pastimes of appearance, by recounting which alone the heart is purified and one is able to realize one's true nature. So that's what Kardama says here, that your very birth and appearance is purifying, and you are naturally endowed with all the six qualities. So technically, the word Bhagavan in Sanskrit means one who possesses what is called as Bhaga, which are six qualities, and it's listed here: Aishwarya, Vairagya, Yasho, Avabodha, Virya, Shriya. So these six qualities, Aishwarya is opulence, Vairagya is dispassion or renunciation, Yasha is fame, Avabodha is wisdom, Virya is power, and Shriya is energy. So with all these six powers fully in you, you have appeared here, and I take total refuge in you. And then he says a beautiful verse. He says, I completely surrender unto Kapila, the Supreme Lord. He's talking to his own son, who is a little baby still, who is just born, and how beautifully he glorifies knowing what this baby is going to do. Sage Kardama glorifies by saying, I surrender unto you, O Kapila, who has all potencies at his beck and call, who alone appears as matter, who is the true spirit, who is the cosmic mind Mahat, who is time itself, who is the ego that's made of the three gunas, who protects all the worlds, who issues forth and reabsorbs this universe at his own will, and who is the all knowing seer. So, this is all the ways in which he completely summarizes and glorifies. Let's look at the verse, it's so nice. Param pradhanam purusham mahantam kalam kavim trivritam lokapalam atmanubhutyanu prapancham swachanda shaktim kapilam prapadye. So he says, Kapilam prapadye, I surrender unto Kapila. Param pradhanam purusham mahantam. He says, you are the supreme original being, the cosmic mind, kalam kavim trivritam lokapalam, and you are time itself, you are the all knowing seer. You alone appear as the ego with its three gunas. You guard all the world, and you, through your own potency, issue forth, sustain, and reabsorb this universe. So, to you, the cosmic being, the supreme being, I surrender. And then he says, now that I have discharged all my duties, including the debt I owed to my father Brahma, in terms of bringing forth my 9 daughters and now you, and I have gained all my desire by looking at you, by having your darshan, I want to take leave and go as a recluse. So this is what Kardama had originally said, as we know, as the condition, in fact, to marry Devahuti. And she asked him to wait for a male child, and now Kapila is born. So even that is complete. So Sage Kardama now takes leave of his own son, who is the Supreme Lord, by saying, now that I have done everything I need to do, please give me the permission so that I can roam at will on this world as a recluse, as a sannyasi, to simply abide in true self. So the Supreme Being speaks to him, even though he is, and this happens because of the potency of the Lord. The voice of the Supreme Being comes forth from Kapila, who is still a baby, and he says, whatever I say always is considered as pramana. Pramana means an authority, and therefore even the word I gave you, which is the incident where Sage Kardama got this vision of the Lord, and Lord told him that I'll appear as your son. He says that is indeed why I have now born. And he says this present birth of mine is meant to give the wisdom that can help seekers realize the essence of truth. So he says here, Etanme janma lokesmin mumukshunam durashayat prasankyanaya tattvanam sammataya atmadarshane. So this janma is in this world for mumukshu. Mumukshu means those who desire moksha or liberation, in order to remove all obstacles and help the seekers of liberation realize the true self through Sankhya and have the vision of their own self, Atma Darshane. For this I have appeared, and this mysterious path of self knowledge has been obscured for a long time. So, every once in a while, the wisdom gets obscured. So, Krishna says the same in Bhagavad Gita too, when he instructs Arjuna that this wisdom of Gita was instructed already, but it was lost, and so I am reviving it by instructing you. So, similarly, here also Kapila says that this wisdom being lost, I'm instructing you. So now you can go. So rather, he is going to instruct Devahuti, the mother, but he tells his father that now you can go wherever you like because you are already free and you are having no attachment to your body. So you can go and you can simply dedicate all your actions to me and simply adore me, that is, worship me wherever you are, and you will realize the true self. You can simply behold me in your own heart wherever you are, and thereby you will be freed of all sorrow, all false identification, and attain the supreme state of fearlessness. Whereas here I will be instructing my mother Devahuti, which is the wife of Kardama. So he just says, don't worry, you can go on. You can live the life of a recluse, beholding me in your heart and realize me, while I'll instruct Mother Devahuti the supreme spiritual wisdom which frees one from bondage for all desires and all suffering. So, thus addressed by the Lord, Sage Kardama was very pleased. He went around the Lord. It is always said to go around, just like a temple, go around a great being in a clockwise manner. And so he went around him, and then he very happily withdrew to the forest. And then finally, it describes how Kardama spent the rest of his time. He observed a vow of silence, and he completely, exclusively fixed his mind on Sri Hari, and he renounced fire as well as dwelling. So, this is the quality of a sannyasi. True sannyasi is one who never touches fire. In other words, they don't cook for themselves, and therefore they never light the fire. And that's the quality of sannyasi. They call niragnihi. Niragnir aniketanaha. Aniketana means, niketan means to place to live. So they don't have a permanent place to live and they don't touch the fire to cook. They simply rely on alms given by others. So this is how Kapila lives, roaming around the globe without any attachment. He fixed his mind on the Supreme Being, which is devoid of all gunas, and the Supreme Being that is the source of everything, that brings everything to light and yet is untouched by everything, and which can be realized most easily through exclusive devotion. So, such is the quality of the Supreme Being. It says, Gunava bhase viguna Eka bhaktya anubhavite. So with exclusive devotion, one can realize the Supreme Being who is free of all three gunas and from whom all gunas come forth, and thereby he was free from egotism, free from a sense of I and mine, free from pairs of opposites, and seeing everything with the same eye. He says, Kardama, Nirahankritir nirmamascha nirdvandah samadrik swadrik. Nirahankriti he means without any ahankar or ego, nirmama without any sense of mind, nirdvandvah without any duality, samadrik seeing everything as same, swadrik seeing everything as one's own self. The great sage Kardama, with his mind turned inward, was perfectly composed and he looked like an ocean without waves. So, waves are the disturbances of the mind that seem to disturb the peace of the ocean. But when one goes within the ocean, there is no perception of waves and there is only the total peace. So, similarly, here it's given as a simile that Kardama was free of all the waves of thoughts and appeared like a calm ocean, his mind fixed in total devotion to the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. He says, Vasudeve Bhagavati Sarvagnye Pratyagmani Parena Bhakti Bhavena Labdhatma Mukta Bandhanaha. With exclusive devotion in Vasudeva, Supreme Lord, and therefore free of any other attachment, he was completely free of the bondage of ignorance, and thereby he saw everything in him and him in everything. Atmanam sarvabhuteshu bhagavantam avasthitam apashyat sarvabhutani bhagavatyapi chatmani. He perceived the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan, which is his own self, as present in all living beings, and all living beings as present in Bhagavan, which is his own self. So, this is again the verse in Gita which Krishna beautifully summarizes. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pashyati. One who sees me in everything and sees everything in me. So that's exactly what Sage Kardama sees here. He sees Bhagavan in everything and everything in Bhagavan, because there is nothing other than Bhagavan, and therefore all that appears, the various bodies, the various entities, the various places, people, and one's own body, and the various thoughts, and everything that appears is simply like the various bubbles from the ocean of Bhagavan. Therefore, there is no entity, no I, no separate self other than one supreme being. And so everything is in Bhagavan and Bhagavan is in everything. This is what Sage Kardama saw. And in this way, it is said Kardama, with no desire for anything, with total freedom from malice, he was even minded, and with complete devotion, he realized his oneness and left the earth. So it is said, Icha dvesha vihinena sarvatra samachetasa bhagavad bhakti yuktena prapta bhagavati gatihi. Such a nice way Kardama's pastimes are described. Kardama, the great sage, who was instrumental in bringing forth Lord Kapila, finally, free from all desire and aversion, with oneness of vision, even-mindedness, and total devotion, Bhagavad Bhakti Yuktena Prapta Bhagavati Gatihi. He attained the Supreme Being, and this is how Sage Kardama's story ends. Now, this chapter ends with this. From the next chapter onward, we will see the glorious instructions directly given by Lord Kapila to his mother Devahuti on Sankhya Yoga with devotion. This chapter is already very special because it has the appearance of the Lord again. Every avatar, when it comes, like we saw Varaha avatar come before, which had a very different mood, of killing a demon. And now we have the avatar of Kapila come, which has a very different mood of simply appearing to teaching his own mother and instructing his own father too. And we saw his brief instructions to his father and how his father was liberated simply by seeing his newly born son getting those instructions and leaving. And now, going forward, we will see the Lord's instructions to his mother, which are one of the most profound discourses of Bhagavatam, which will continue from next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.